Okay, great. We are going to read chapter 7 of The Body of Christopher Creed. I thought that sleeping so much would take away my bad mood. It didn't, really. In homeroom, I decided to rip on Alex about band practice. He swore he had been home the whole night, that he'd been working on this history paper we had due next week. He swore Renee wasn't with him. Yeah, since when do you not knock out a history paper 10 minutes before it's due? I asked him in disgust. Could you at least have called? Well, you could have called me, he said, like I was his mother. Hey, guess what? I remembered this one time I hit Creed that I totally forgot about. Can you believe I hit him twice and totally forgot about the second time? If you can forget about band practice, you can forget anything, I guess, I muttered, but he ignored me. We were about 12 years old, and I was riding my bike to Ryan's house and passed by that old Indian burial ground behind your house. Lenape Indians burial ground? Yeah, it was in the woods out behind our property. Though whether it was an actual burial ground was unproven. All we ever dug up as kids were a few arrowheads. I saw Creed coming out of there, and he had this piece of paper, Alex went on. He showed it to me from like 10 feet off and wouldn't let me come any closer. He said it was his treasure map, and he had just buried treasure in there. He buried treasure in the Indian burial ground? I asked. I'd heard of kids digging in there. I'd never heard of anyone burying anything in there. Leave it to Creed. Yeah, and he was being so obnoxious with his map. He kept waving it by the corner and going, I would venture to say that my treasure will be very valuable someday. I would venture to say that it wouldn't be wise for me to share it with you. His smart mouth mowed, I said, and shuddered. I would venture to say, Alex laughed, and suffice it to say. He always said suffice it to say. Right, I laughed too. So he's dangling this treasure map in front of me and telling me he doesn't want to tell me what he just buried. Alex laughed again. We were like 12 years old, not 8. He thinks I'm going to beg him to see this treasure map, right? What would make him think that a 12-year-old would want to play pirates? First, I grabbed the map and was going to tear it into 1,000 pieces. I couldn't look at it, give him the satisfaction. So I tried to tear it, but he had sent it through one of those plastic machines so that it was inside something that felt like a placemat. I cracked up totally despite myself. You mean he laminated his treasure map? Yes. And he was all looking at me like nanny nanny boo boo when I couldn't tear it. So I just threw it down and hit him. I was still laughing. Oh my God. I would keep that story under my hat because if not, everyone's going to be digging for Creed's treasure in a few weeks and keeping me awake all night. Alex shook his head. Actually, the Indian burial ground is not the main attraction. All of a sudden, the Pine Barrens is. Did you hear about Mrs. Creed in the Wawa last night? No, I told him. I was sleeping early. You shouldn't sleep, man. You miss everything. That's why I was sleeping. He wouldn't take the hint. Ryan was down there and came to my house all freaking. He said that Mrs. Creed had been in there like 3 times looking to guilt kids who had not helped her search the woods for Chris on Saturday. Renee and I were afraid to go down to Wawa after that. Oh, so you and Renee sat in your house instead of hanging at Wawa, I blasted. Don't give me this history paper. Shit. He got kind of quiet, like, oops. I looked up at the clock, 5 minutes until the bell. I really didn't feel like hearing this. Mrs. Creed talked to Mrs. Kyle one of the times she was in the Wawa last night. Alex grabbed my arm. Like this was totally important in comparison to his lying in my face. She says she and Mr. Creed really want to believe Chris ran away, but she said she had kept every dime of his paper route money for 6 years. He's got $3,000 in the bank. She's been watching the bank account, like going online for the balance, 3 times a day, and not a penny of it has moved. In other words, he hasn't touched his bank account, and no money is missing from anywhere in town. No money, no bus ticket. No muscle, no surviving in the woods. Yeah, she's starting to think he's dead. But she's saying somebody else wrote the note to make it look like a suicide. And what really happened is that one of the Boones probably Richardson, killed him and dumped the body in the Pine Barrens, maybe the Boondocks. Pulled back and stared at him, just like Leandra was saying yesterday. You got it. I shut my eyes and tried to tell myself that there was something to enjoy in this. Even my friends were getting some kind of roller coaster ride out of it. When your friends start talking all negative on the Boons, it's one thing. But here was a mature adult, the kid's own mother. Well, I felt confused. Did anyone see Richardson with Chris after school on Thursday? I don't know, he shrugged like that wasn't important. All I know is that Mrs. Creed is now saying he had it in for Chris ever since he pushed Chris off the bleachers last year and busted his foot. I'd forgotten about that point. Here I was the night before thinking the Boons were overrated in the violence department. I had to admit to myself that of all the kids who had punched out Chris, Bo's thing had to be the worst. It made for a trip to the hospital, for x-rays and crutches and all that stuff. Plus, Bo carried a knife and mouthed off to people all the time. I was wondering if I should feel like a fool yet. Alex watched me, look confused, and he shrugged. Makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, I muttered softly, but something about it was bothering me. The vision floated through my head of the day Bo pushed Chris and all the medics showed up, and that red flashing glare of the ambulance bounced around the classroom walls. The medics had taken Chris out in one of those non-movable neck contraptions. It was a big deal. Bo got in a lot of trouble, especially when his only excuse was the dude was all motor mouth and right in my ear and wouldn't shut up. We used to hit Creed for the same type of stuff in, 6th grade. But this was high school. It made Bo seem out of control, totally violent. 6th grade. It was easy to remember all that blood running from Creed's nostrils, so much so that the other details kind of got lost. Maybe I had wanted them to get lost. The whole thing came wafting back to me like a bad smell. The teacher had come running over and collared me, and she called me selfish for caring more about a guitar than another human being. She hauled us both into the corridor, but because of Chris's bleeding nose, she dropped him at the nurse's office before taking me to the principal's office. The nurse took one look at him and said, "It could be broken. He should have an x-ray." And so as I was sitting in the principal's office, I saw the medics out the window. They took him away on a stretcher. Richardson had sent Creed to the hospital, and the only other person in the world to do that was me. Nobody was wondering if I had killed Creed. The bell rang, and I almost jumped out of my chair. Alex stood up beside me, going, "How's La La Land, abnormal one?" "Fine." I probably should have reminded Alex about me in 6th grade, but I was starting to feel there wasn't too much that would get in the way of his perfect sense. He was my friend, my best friend, but even best friends have this line, and you don't cross it. I had never thought about Alex's line before because I had never come so close to it, but I knew it instinctively now, like I knew Alex. Some people you joke around with, you play poorly written songs with, you bust on boons with, but you don't go after their version of reality. He wouldn't hear me. It would just piss him off. That pissed me off. "I can't do band practice tonight," I said. He crossed himself like he was Catholic as he went into the corridor. "Are you at death's door?" "No," I shrugged kind of casually. "Allie McDermott wants me to come over." I watched him stare and almost added the one detail I didn't really care about, which was to meet her boyfriend. But I decided just to let him think whatever he wanted to. And that's the end of Chapter 7 in the Body of Christopher Creed. Thanks for listening.